Welcome to the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. Today we are walking through an MPT. We're going to do this in two parts, so this is part one. Your Bar Exam Toolbox hosts are Allison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the bar exam experience so you can study effectively, stay sane, and hopefully pass and move on with your life. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Allison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on your favorite listening app and check out our sister podcast, the Law School Toolbox podcast, as well. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on barexamtoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today we are walking through a multistate performance test. This is another in our series of podcasts talking about how to approach questions on the UBE. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you won't miss anything in our upcoming discussions. Note that for these performance tests, you should check out our discussions for both the California and UBE performance test because the formats are extremely similar. This episode is a little bit different from our discussions of how to approach essays because instead of covering the law you'll need to know and then how to apply it to the question, we have divided this question into two podcasts. Today we will be talking about how to approach the file in the library in the February 2018 performance test. This particular MPT asks you to draft a memo. Each performance test contains instructions, a file, and a library. Carefully read the instructions because they contain a memo that will ask you to discuss specific issues or resolve a general legal problem. The file contains all of the facts that you are presented with to handle the request in the introduction memo. You will see things like transcripts, documents, and in this case, printouts from government websites. In other MPTs, you might see things like letters, wills, or even court documents. The library contains all of the legal research you need to analyze the issues. This can include cases and statutes. Remember that an MPT is a closed universe, intellectual exercise, so you will need to rely on what is in the library to make your arguments. The packet can be a bit overwhelming at first, so it is important to start with the instructions. The examiners will include extraneous facts and legal research, but the introduction memo will help you focus. You will need to understand the scope of the question before you dig in. You only have 90 minutes to get through the entire essay, so don't waste time analyzing extraneous information. The file and the library are equally important, and test takers have different preferences on which to review first. Either way, make a plan and stick to it on test day. Today, we are going to review the instructions, then move on to the library, and then circle back to the facts. Remember, the MPT is only 90 minutes long. We recommend spending 45 minutes reviewing and planning your answer, and then the remaining 45 minutes actually drafting it. Sticking with your plan will make drafting much smoother. So we're going to start today with the task memo and go over it section by section. Here's what the heading says. Belford and Swan, attorneys at law. To examinee from Emily Swan on February 27th, 2018. Re Danielle Hastings inquiry. So we know from the header that we've received the task memo from a named partner at the law firm. Now back to the memo. A friend of mine from college, Danielle Hastings, has asked me to look into a legal matter for her. Danielle is currently serving on the board of directors for the Municipal Utility District number 12, MUD 12. MUDs are local government entities authorized by the Franklin Constitution that provide public water, sewer, drainage, and other services to suburban neighborhoods not served by the city. Now, this paragraph establishes who the client is and some of her background, but we need to read on to learn more about the nature of the case. So back to the memo. Danielle has always been civic-minded, and she is very involved in her community. In addition to being a director for MUD 12, she volunteers at the local library and is a volleyball coach at the local YMCA. She is interested in getting involved in election and voting activities in her community. There are 2 election-related positions available in her voting precinct: county election judge and precinct chair. So now that we know a little bit more, Danielle is interested in expanding her community service options. We still don't know why she's asking her attorney friend for help, so we better read on. Back to the memo. Both positions sound interesting to Danielle. She is not sure which position she would want. Before making any decision, she needs our advice as to whether she is allowed to serve as a county election judge or precinct chair while at the same time remaining a MUD 12 director. I have attached several opinions by the Attorney General of Franklin, which discuss the applicable law. Now, there it is. We now know that Danielle is looking for advice as to whether she can hold 2 positions simultaneously. The next paragraph should give us even more detail about what we need to analyze. So back to the memo. Please draft a memorandum to me analyzing whether Danielle can apply for and hold the county election judge position or the precinct chair position while simultaneously serving as a member of the board of directors for MUD 12. Address the question for both the county election judge and precinct chair positions. Make sure to discuss all legal issues relating to each position. The memo tells us here that we are facing a 2-part analysis. First, we need to determine whether Danielle can serve as a MUD board member while being an election judge. Second, we need to determine whether she can serve as a MUD board member while being a precinct chair. We also know from the file we will need to understand what the role of each of these positions entails, and from the library we will need to identify any legal limitations to holding 2 roles simultaneously. Now, the task memo does not ask us to persuade someone so she can hold these positions. Rather, we are being asked to make a conclusion about the law. Back to the memo. Do not prepare a separate statement of facts, but be sure to incorporate the relevant facts and legal authorities into your analysis. So the memo is limiting us here. Don't make the mistake of taking time to write out a facts section. Make sure to interweave facts into your analysis section instead. Okay, now let's turn to the library so that we know what we're looking for when we read through the file. We know we have an article from the State of Franklin Constitution, excerpts from the Franklin Election Code, and the 3 opinions from the Attorney General of Franklin that were alluded to in the task memo. So let's go in order. We'll analyze the constitutional article first. Remember, we're looking for any black-letter law that will help us answer Danielle's question about whether she can hold 2 offices. So we're looking at Article 12, Section 25, holding more than one office, exceptions. So here, from the title alone, we can see that this will be a relevant piece of law. So subsection A says, no person shall hold or exercise at the same time more than one civil office of emolument, except for justices of the peace, county commissioners, and officers and enlisted men and women of the United States Armed Forces, the National Guard, and the Franklin State Guard, or unless otherwise specially provided herein. Subsection B says exceptions. Number 4, a public school teacher or retired school teacher may receive compensation for serving as a member of a governing body of a municipal utility district. Now, we have some new questions to work through. No one can hold more than one office of emolument. We should be wondering right now what an office of emolument is. Take a note of the potentially relevant offices that are exempt from this requirement: justices of the peace and county commissioners. Also note that school teachers may receive compensation for serving as a MUD board member. Now, remember, Danielle is a current MUD board member. This is a solid hint that she receives compensation as one. So let's move on to see how that might become relevant. Next, let's turn to the Franklin Election Code. We will go through each of the 4 excerpt sections. As we read them, keep the task memo in mind. We're looking for anything related to MUD board membership, precinct chairs, and election judges. Okay, Section 465, the appointment of election judges for each election precinct. Election judges shall be appointed by each county for each election precinct in which an election is held. So here we will learn that election judges are appointed by each county. We will eventually need to learn what an office of emolument is. So hold on to the idea that they are appointed, not elected, in case that impacts whether being an election judge is an office of emolument. Next, we'll look at Section 471, General Responsibility of County Election Judges. Section A, the chief judge is in charge of and responsible for the management and conduct of the election at the polling place of the election precinct that the judge serves. Section B, the chief judge for each election precinct shall appoint election clerks to assist the judge in the conduct of an election at the polling place served by the judge. Subsection C, the chief judge shall designate the working hours of and assign the duties to be performed by the election clerks serving under the judge. It moves then to subsection F. The chief judge shall preserve order and prevent breaches of the peace and violations of this code in the polling place and in the area within which electioneering and loitering are prohibited. In performing duties under this subsection, the chief may appoint one or more licensed persons to act as a special peace officer for the polling place. And then section H. An election judge may administer any oath required to be made at a polling place. So now this is a large chunk of statutory language. As we read through it, we should note the role the chief judge plays in appointing election judges. Some of the other subsections may not be relevant to our task memo, so we need to make note of what we think we can use and quickly move on. All right, now let's go to Section 480, ineligibility of candidate for office. A person who is a candidate in an election for a contested public or party office is ineligible to serve in an election to be held on the same day as that election as an election judge or clerk in any precinct in which the office is sought to be voted on. So here we have a bit more information now. We know that someone who is running for public or party office cannot also be an election judge if the election is held in the same day. Here we need to make a note that we need to determine whether MUD board membership or precinct chair are positions that would require a contested election. Now finally, let's look at Section 492, Judges for Elections of Other Political Subdivisions. The governing body of a political subdivision other than a county shall appoint the election judges for the elections ordered by the political subdivision. So now we know that county election judges do not have oversight over other political subdivision elections. We will need to determine whether the MUD board is a different political subdivision from the county. So we've looked at the Constitution and the Election Code. Now let's move on to the Attorney General opinion letters now. We have 3 letters from 2003, 2008, and 2010, and each one addresses a different question. If you're looking at the packet, we will start with the 2003 letter. In it, the Attorney General answers this question: whether Franklin Construction Article 12, Section 25, prohibits a constable from simultaneously serving as a commissioner of an emergency services district. So what do we know from just the question? We know that the Attorney General will likely analyze the same section of the Constitution we just reviewed. We know that there will probably be an analysis of the role of a constable and the role of a commissioner of an emergency services district. These are both new roles to us, so we will want to take notes in case we can draw parallels to the roles in which Danielle is concerned. Now, in this letter, the Attorney General concludes that a constable holds an office of emolument because they are paid on a salary basis. This is a key point. There are citations to a former Attorney General opinion and a local government code. The Attorney General also analyzes whether the position of commissioner is also a civil office and notes that the determinative factor distinguishing an officer from an employee is whether any sovereign function of the government is conferred upon the individual to be exercised by the individual for the benefit of the general public, largely independent of the control of others. There is a citation to the Franklin Supreme Court case in there too, Morris Independent School District versus Lehigh. The Attorney General concludes that these commissioners do meet the Morris test and are thus civil officers. The letter then analyzes whether the commissioners hold offices of emolument and concludes that they are because the $50 payment received per meeting. Here's the key piece from the letter. An emolument is a pecuniary profit, gain, or advantage. If an office holder is entitled to compensation, his or her office is an office of emolument, even if the person refuses to accept any compensation. However, the term emolument does not include the legitimate reimbursement of expenses. While the reimbursement of actual expenses does not constitute an emolument, any amount received in excess of actual expenses is an emolument. Likewise, an amount received as compensation for each meeting, such as a fixed per diem amount, is also an emolument. So we now have a definition of an office of emolument. We would want to begin to highlight or underline this so we can easily find it when we begin outlining and then drafting. So let's move on to the next letter. This one is longer, 3 pages, so we will need to carefully read it for the relevant legal issues and discard the rest of it. So here's the question it answers: whether an individual may simultaneously serve as a director of a municipal utility district and a member of the city zoning commission. So from the question, we know that we're going to see an analysis of the MUD director role. We will also see a discussion about the city zoning commission. We need to read to see if we can establish any parallels to either the election board or the party precinct chair. In the first paragraph, the Attorney General tells us that someone cannot hold both a MUD director role and a planning and zoning commission membership because of the common law doctrine of incompatibility. So we're going to want to know more about this common law doctrine of incompatibility. So as we go through the letter, keep an eye out for clarification. Now in the next paragraph, we learn a key fact from the Franklin Water Code. MUD directors are entitled to receive compensation for serving on the MUD board, specifically a $150 per diem payment as compensation for attending board meetings or engaging in other MUD-related activities. Now, reflect back to the last Attorney General letter. A fixed per diem amount is an emolument, so it looks like MUD directors hold an office of emolument and because of this $150 per diem payment. The Attorney General then tells us that because of the common law doctrine of incompatibility, it is not enough to look at whether one of the offices is an office of emolument. We must also determine whether the office's duties conflict. A conflict would violate the common law doctrine of incompatibility. Now here's his description of the doctrine. The doctrine is 3 aspects: self-appointment, self-employment, and conflicting loyalties. Self-appointment and self-employment are only impacted if the responsibilities of one position include appointing or employing the second position. The Attorney General concludes that because MUD does not appoint or employ members of the Zoning Commission and vice versa, he only needs to analyze whether those 2 positions involve conflicting loyalties. This is a clue for us. We will need to determine whether any of our positions require self-employment or self-appointment once we have more facts about them. The Attorney General then analyzes the conflicting loyalties prong of the doctrine and states that as a threshold matter, both positions at hand must constitute a civil office. He then does us a favor and analyzes MUD board membership under the Morris test, concluding that MUD officers are indeed civil officers because of their independent sovereign functions under the Water Code. He also concludes that zoning commission members are civil officers because they too exercise a sovereign function of the government. His next paragraph considers whether those two offices are incompatible and concludes that they are, because they are potentially divided loyalties because of overlapping jurisdictions. So now let's move on to the final Attorney General letter. Here, the Attorney General considers whether a member of a school district board of trustees may simultaneously hold the office of county treasurer. Unlike the last letter, the Attorney General concludes that the office of county treasurer and the position of trustee of an independent school district do not conflict, so someone can hold both. He does the same two-part analysis in this letter. First, he determines that because the school district trustee cannot be paid for the position, it is not an office of emolument. He then analyzes the jurisdictions of both positions to see whether they violate the common law doctrine of incompatibility. He finds that because there is no self-appointment or self-employment across positions, he only needs to review any potential conflicting loyalties. He ultimately concludes that because the county treasurer does not have any exclusive authority over the school district beyond ministerial duties, there is no conflict, and these positions do not violate the common law doctrine of incompatibility. Now, what do we learn from these three letters? We now have a definition of the civil office of emolument. We also have a three-prong analysis to guide us through whether two positions violate the common law doctrine of incompatibility. We should have underlined these or made notes in the margins so we can look toward applying the facts we're about to see to the law. We know that Danielle's MUD position is a civil office of emolument, so if either the party precinct position or the election judge position are, she would not be able to seek these offices. And that's it for the library. So let's take a look at the file now. We have a transcript of Danielle's interview with Attorney Swan. We also have a printout of the Marin County Board of Elections position descriptions. First, we will look at the interview transcript. We're going to look for any facts that can help us determine whether either of the positions Danielle is considering are civil offices of emoluments or whether they violate the common law doctrine of incompatibility when paired with her MUD board position. So she starts by describing her MUD board position. She is in District 12, which provides water, sewage, and draining services to her neighborhood, Eagle Springs. She describes her interest in being a county election judge. This would involve supervising elections in her precinct. She then describes the precinct chair position. This would entail reaching out to voters to educate them about candidates. The county election judge is an appointed position, but the precinct chair is an elected position within the party. Danielle also reports that if she were to be appointed an election judge, she would be the chief judge because the governor is from her party. She says that if she can hold either of the positions while being a MUD director, she will choose between them. But if she can't hold either while being a director, she will continue her MUD board position. Danielle explains the role of MUD director and says that MUDs are political subdivisions of the state of Franklin, and they operate independently of county government. We learn that MUDs provide municipal level services, have elected officials, and are authorized to charge fees to residents, manage taxes, and sell bonds. MUDs conduct their own elections in May and have their own election judges, separate from partisan political elections, which take place entirely separately in November. Now, some of these facts should be ringing bells for you based on what we learned in the library section. We need to be reading this section with an eye toward applying any relevant facts to the black letter law from the library. In particular, think about the common law doctrine of incompatibility, and then consider the jurisdiction of MUD boards. When you begin drafting, you will want to analyze whether there's an overlap between the jurisdictions of the two positions she is considering and the MUD board. Now let's move on to the printout of the Marin County Board of Elections position descriptions. The printout describes both the county election position and the precinct chair position. We'll start with the election judges. Election judges conduct city, county, state, and federal elections in a precinct and are in charge of election day activities. They administer the procedures in the Franklin Election Code and serve on a panel to resolve voting-related challenges. The judges are nominated by their political parties, but are not allowed to display party affiliation during the election. They are 2-year appointments. The chief election judge is from the party that had the most votes during the last governor's election. Notably, the judges are volunteers. They are reimbursed for training, supplies, and other expenses, but receive no compensation. On to the precinct chairs. The precinct is the small political subdivision in Franklin. The precinct is the smallest political subdivision in Franklin. Political parties create the precinct chairs, not by statute. The precinct chairs organizes and campaign and serve as voting members of their party's executive committee. The members of the party in each precinct vote for their chair during the party primaries every 2 years. This is another volunteer, uncompensated position. We want to be thinking about the Attorney General's definition of civil office here. Now, that's it for the facts. We know that both of the new positions Danielle wants to consider are uncompensated, and thus are not offices of emolument. But we also know that that's not enough to determine whether they are offices of emolument. We need to determine whether either of them violates the common law doctrine of incompatibility when paired with her MUD board membership. This will require reviewing the test described by the Attorney General in his letters. First, are they civil offices? If yes, do they involve self-appointment, self-employment, or conflicting loyalties? These are the issues we will need to develop when we begin drafting the portion of the test. Now, reviewing the file is time-consuming, but doing a thorough job sets us up for a well-drafted essay. The bar exam testers will make up any number of scenarios, but by developing a solid strategy for analyzing the packet, we can handle any variation. Always read the task memo first. This is a gift from the test makers. It will tell you exactly what you need to do and what you need to look for. Now next, you can study the library and the file. As you read through the library, look for the black letter law. You will often have to devise a multi-part test, so look for anything that will help you do that. When you start on the file, keep the black letter law in mind so you can look for the helpful facts to assist in your analysis. Now we will go over how to outline and draft an answer in the next podcast reviewing this MPT, because with that, we are out of time. I want to take a second to remind you to check out our blog at barexamtoolbox.com, which is full of helpful hints to help you prepare and stay sane as you study for the bar exam. You can also find information on our website about our courses, tools, and one-on-one tutoring programs to support you as you study for the UBE or California Bar Exam. If you enjoyed this episode of the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app. We'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you are still in law school, you might like to check out our popular Law School Toolbox podcast as well. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Allison at lee@barexamtoolbox.com or allison@barexamtoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at barexamtoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.